Hi, I'm Rabbi Phil Cohen. In June of 2025, I traveled to Israel hoping to meet with rabbis and talk with them about their lives in the rabbinate, mainly in Israel. It goes without saying that I've been deeply interested in Israel for as long as I can remember. Its people, its arguments, its constantly shifting present. But this time, I wanted to listen in a somewhat different way. I wanted to hear the stories of Israeli rabbis, why they chose this calling, what sustains them, what they have learned, and what they hope for specifically in the Israeli context. And I was very lucky. I met with men and women from different denominations, different stages of life, different corners of the country. My plan was to visit them in their homes, to sit across from them and talk face to face. Unfortunately, the week I arrived, Israel entered a 12-day clash with Iran. I ended up conducting all of my interviews from my Airbnb on Zoom. Incoming missiles interrupted one interview as my subject and I both fled to shelter. Even on Zoom, however, the conversations, all of them, were rich, revealing, and deeply human. Something unexpected came out of that experience. Originally, I had planned to speak with rabbis all around the world for this podcast. Maybe I still will going forward. But for now, I'm staying with Israeli rabbis. Their stories and Israel's stories are bound up together in very interesting and creative ways, and I find that connection endlessly fascinating. That, then, is what this podcast is about. The lives, the questions, the faith of those who serve the Jewish people, and the God with whom we live in covenant across our shared history. I am Rabbi Phil Cohen, and I am a small part of that story. I first met Aryeh Ben-David when we both came to the Jerusalem campus of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion to begin studies toward the Reform Rabbinate. But he took a different course and eventually became an Orthodox rabbi with an interesting career in Israel. He's worked with Livnot or Lehibanot, then as a teacher at the Pardes Institute. He founded Ayekah, an organization devoted to training educators of all denominations how, in the words of Ayekah's website, to teach Jewish subjects with more soulfulness, personal meaning, and impact on life. So my subject for the moment is Aryeh Ben-David, whom I studied with for a year back in 1978 and 1979 when both of us started at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion program in Jerusalem. But he took a different path. I asked my friend Rabbi Aryeh Ben-David to put us in touch, and we put us in contact. And Aryeh agreed to be part of this project. He started to become a rabbi in the Reform movement, and you decided that that was not sufficient for your purposes, for your spiritual identity. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Great. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you.
So I grew up outside of New York City, and my family and my grandparents and my great-grandparents, they were all Reformed Jews on both sides. So I decided after college that I wanted to do something to really improve the world, heal the world, be a positive force in the world. And I looked at our Reform rabbi as a role model, and then decided after graduating to apply to HUC and start the rabbinical program. So I came to Israel in 1978 to do the first year, and I really didn't know anything. I knew 6 words of Hebrew. Dog, yeled, yalda, girl, boy, shalom, kelev, dog. I probably knew who Abraham and Isaac were, but I don't know if I knew who Jacob was. My decision to become a Reform rabbi actually had much more to do with healing the world and civil rights and all the good issues of the 60s and 70s than with Judaism per se. And I came to Jerusalem, my first time in Israel. No one in my family had ever been to Jerusalem. And I was just shocked. I was just shocked by Jerusalem, by witnessing people observing Shabbat. I saw the first time in my life a woman light Friday night candles. It was all new to me. It was all new. And I was a philosophy major in college, but this whole idea of Torah, is there Torah? Is it true? Is there God? I had grown up with the statement in our family that God was the greatest thing that man ever created. And no one in my family ever either believes in God or talks about God. And here I am in Jerusalem, and these conversations kept coming up, and I was totally helpless in having even an opinion. What do I think? What do I believe? So I went through the year. It was a wonderful, wonderful year at HUC. Really a 12-month Ulpan, learning Hebrew full-time. And by the end of the year, I had pretty good Hebrew. I could read the newspapers. And I had also fallen in love with Israel. It was a wonderful year, 1978, 79, the Camp David Accords, peace with Egypt. It was a very exciting time to be in Israel. And at the end of the year, I was completely confused. I mean, should I be a reform rabbi? I have no idea what I'm reforming. I have no idea about anything. So how can I begin even to make a decision to be a rabbi when I know so little? So I went to a number of people. I went to the head of the reform movement, and he said I should be a reform rabbi. I went to the head of the conservative movement. He said I should definitely be a conservative rabbi. I went to an Orthodox rabbi, and he said, without question, I should become an Orthodox rabbi. So I realized I couldn't trust anybody. Everybody was just pushing their own agenda. I didn't know what to do. And somehow I had heard about a place in California, which I had never been, called the Brandeis Bardeen Institute, which had two scholars, Dennis Prager and Joseph Tulishkin, running it. And they called themselves Reservadox, a little reform, a little conservative, a little Orthodox. It was a summer camp for adults. I was 24. I sent them a telegram. Remember, this is 1979. I sent them a telegram saying, can I come? They said yes. So after finishing the year, I flew out there, completely confused still about my Jewish identity and what path I should take. And when I was there, I met a scholar in residence there called Dr. David Weiss, who was the head of the cancer research program in Jerusalem, Hadassah Hospital. He talked to me. He listened to me, and he said, well, what if I gave you a scholarship to go back to study in Israel at this place called the Pardes Institute? So I said, oh my God, okay, I'll do it. So that instigated my dropping out of Hebrew College to go and learn for a year. My family, my parents went crazy, crazy upset with that. But I returned to Jerusalem to study at Pardes, which was in his sixth year at the time, which was a kind of an open, pluralistic place to learn. I studied there for a year, for the first time in my life, being exposed to traditional texts like Gemara, Talmud, Mishnah, Midrash, commentaries on the Torah. It was all new for me. And after 1 year, I said, I probably need a second year because there are so many books on the shelves and I still didn't know anything. And then at the end of the second year, I said, maybe I need another year. And so I worked a little bit, and I'd gotten married during that time to Sandra. We met at that camp in California. We got married in Jerusalem. And long story short, 1 year led to about almost 10 years of full-time continued studying. The last 4 years were in Mevaseret Zion in a very, very Israeli, all Hebrew, all Israeli yeshiva. I was the only American there. It was a very big transition for Sandra and myself. And I studied there, and I was finishing tractates of Talmud and really going very deep. It was a 3-year program, actually. And at the end of the third year, I went up to the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, and I said to him, listen, I've learned full-time here. I started with my learning partner at 4:30 in the morning, and we learned straight all day. I didn't carry a wallet for 3 years. All I did was learn full-time. And at the end of the third year, I went to the head of the yeshiva and said, even though I've studied here for 3 years, I don't know at all if I believe in God. He said, well, of course you believe in God. Of course, everybody here believes in God. I said, I never really thought about it. It's unbelievable to me that you can learn Jewish texts all day and talk, pretty decently about Jewish subjects, but nobody ever actually confronted me directly and said, Aryeh, do you believe in God? And if I had, I would have ducked the question. I would have said, it's complicated, it's personal, it's difficult, let's not get into it. But I was about to go out to be, a rabbi and teacher, and I realized I have to deal with it. So this head of the yeshiva looked at me and he said, to his credit, he said, I think you ought to stay for another year. I don't think you're ready to go out. So I stayed for another year. I had a chavruta, study partner, who was an Israeli pilot, photographic memory, genius. And we studied all day, only Jewish mystical texts, only Kabbalah. Really head first focusing on the issue of belief and spirituality in God. And at the end of the year, I was transformational and I had really dealt with these inner questions. I felt ready to go out. So I left this yeshiva and Sandra and I moved back to Jerusalem and I started teaching it at the Pardes Institute where I had started. I really also didn't know anything about teaching, but I loved students. I loved the students. You know, during my year at Pardes, I was incredibly lonely. I didn't know anybody. Shabbat, I would spend by myself. And I didn't have a family or cousins or anybody in Israel. And I said, I'm going to help people. So Sandra and I opened our home. We invited our students all the time. And 1 year led to 5 years, led to 10 years, led to 15 years. But at the end of 15, when I started at Pardes, I was a low man on the totem pole. After 15 years, I'd become director of spiritual education. I was in the inner sanctum. I was tenured. I had a prestigious position. And it really was a wonderful, wonderful life. And I began to feel that something was missing. Well, we had a bunch of kids at this time and a mortgage, and there was no way I was going to change my position. So I kind of just pushed down that inner voice and said, I'll continue. I'll be responsible. I'll keep teaching. But I found that after, in my 16th, 17th, 18th year, I started loving the students that were easy to love. And I said to myself, that's a problem. You don't have the patience and the listening that you once had for the students who are a little bit more socially inept, who are a little bit more difficult. They also deserve to be heard, and you're not there for them, are you? So in my 20th year, I left. And it was crazy. It was scary, but I knew I had to leave. What was I going to do? I didn't know. But I also felt this. Look, for me, Judaism is a journey. It's all about the journey of personal growth and spiritual growth. And I felt that while I was a pretty decent teacher of Jewish texts, I saw that a lot of my students, and these were wonderful students in their 20s and 30s and young men and women, the best of the best. I saw that a lot of them were learning, but were not being changed by the learning. They could give great lectures and divrei Torah on Judaism, and they absorbed the material. They were so smart, but they weren't being changed by it. And I felt there was something missing because Judaism was much more than content. I mean, for me personally, I had come from a world that was completely detached from Judaism. And here I was, I'd become pretty observant. I'd become an Orthodox rabbi. My lifestyle had changed, and it was a real journey. So I wasn't trying to make people more religious, but I was just hoping that they would grow in however they chose to grow. And that wasn't happening. So I did a very scary thing for me. I took my severance pay from Pardes and I took a year to invest in research, educational and pedagogic research. And my question was, how can we take the Jewish learning from our minds to our hearts? How can we let it be more than information, but really be transformation? And be changed by it, because the mind learns in one way. We Jews, we're good at that. But the heart learns a different way. The heart learns very slowly. It's very shy. It's scared to open up. So how can you teach to a person's heart? And I'm not a mushy-gushy guy. I don't play the guitar. I don't sing. I don't wear tie-dye. As my kids often tell me, Abba, you're a nerd. You're just such a nerd. When I go wild and crazy and spontaneous, I play chess. Okay? So I'm not this, hippie kind of guy. So how could I, who's so much locked in my head, my mother's from Vienna, we're just always, thinkers, how could I teach to the heart? I took a year. to look at Jewish sources because I said, I can't be the first person to think about this. And after a year of real experimentation and searching and studying, there was a bit of light. I came to develop a whole system of learning of how to teach from the mind to the heart and to the soul, and how to, in the classroom, open up someone's soul. This was transformational for me because I became a rabbi, to help people. And my biggest obstacle in Judaism was God and spirituality. That was my biggest obstacle. I couldn't even ask the questions really until I hit my 30s. I was so afraid and I was so scared of what it would mean. And, to say I believe in God in my family, they think, you joined a cult or you were brainwashed or you were crazy, and it was something that life had not prepared me for. I had a lot of psychological and spiritual obstacles. So I wanted to help people not make the same mistakes that I made, and to have a little courage and take more risks than I made. I began to teach in a different way. The learning became not the goal, but the springboard. And the goal wasn't just to learn. The question was not, do you understand Jewish knowledge? The question became, now that you understand Jewish knowledge, how will that impact you? How will that change you? And I created this little organization, this educational startup called Ayekah, which means, where are you? It's the first question in the Torah that God asks Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Where are you? After Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and hide, God asks, where are you? Well, of course, God knows where they are. Hiding behind a tree is not going to hide you from the creator of the universe. But there's a deep message here that God wanted Adam and Eve to say, we're hiding. We're hiding. We're afraid. We're unsure of ourselves. We have doubts. We have insecurities. We're hiding. And this is an eternal question because, Phil, in each of us, in our own ways, in our own lives, we're always hiding. We're always hiding something, and is afraid to really confront our better selves, our Aryeh 2.0. There's always an obstacle. There's always a challenge. So part of Ayekah became, what's holding you back from growing? What's your obstacle when you're in your 30s and your 50s and your 80s? What's your obstacle? What's holding you back? Let's name it. Let's own it. And let's take a small step to confront it and grow. And my dear wife, Sandra, says that this was the biggest change for me. That when I was a rabbi, I often looked at myself as a rabbi. I had a role that I had to play of being this, scholar, fount of wisdom, bounty of Jewish knowledge and wisdom, who was always giving advice. And I was always giving advice, which is annoying, because I always felt that I had the truth. And I'm just, if you sit with me long enough and, shut up after a while, I'll give you the truth. And this new approach completely changed it because it was like, okay, who am I? I'm just a work in progress. I'm a journeyer like you are on this spiritual journey. I'm a work in progress. And I have to grow also. So let's grow together. And I became much more vulnerable. I have 3 rebbes, 3 role models. One is Jewish, and 2 are not, but they're all very spiritual and religious in their way. One is Parker Palmer, who's a Quaker, who's an educational master. And he really opened my eyes to this, bringing vulnerability into the classroom. The other is Brene Brown, who's a social worker, a professor who brought in the whole idea of, relationships are based on vulnerability. And as a teacher and as a rabbi, you have to open the door and you have to model vulnerability. I had never heard a rabbi say, I don't know, I was wrong. What do you think? But that's who I needed to become. And I have to add one more piece to this. Life teaches us many lessons, Phil. And Sandra and I have been blessed with 6 kids, 2 boys, 4 girls. And when our 4th child, second boy, Yaniv, when he was a teenager, he was a teenager on steroids. Oh my God, adolescence on steroids. He was always too smart for us and too clever. He won every game we ever played, and he was always smarter than his teachers and his rabbis. And when he hit 16 and 17, he began to rebel. And here I am, the rabbi, kind of a public figure, a community figure, and my son is rebelling. He's drinking, he's dabbling in drugs, he's out of control. And I didn't know what to do. And it was incredibly, incredibly humbling. And Yaniv, God bless him, who's now in his 30s, married, CEO of a startup in Tel Aviv. We have a wonderful, great relationship. It was very hard for me. And I learned two things from Yaniv. The first was, oh my God, I can't believe how really absorbed I am in what the neighbors think. What are the neighbors going to think about the rabbi? What are they going to think about the rabbi when his kid goes off the rails? And that was like a real wake-up call to me. It says, Aryeh, you got to let that go. And it took about a week. But then I just really, I said, oh my God, I've got to change this. I'm a public figure, a rabbi, but that's not what an issue here. The issue is my kid and our relationship. So I did let that go. That was a big growth experience for me. And the other was the incredible humbling of having a kid with issues and not having the answers. And it really helped me learn what prayer is. Because prayer is not in the prayer book, and it's not in the synagogue, and it's not saying the words. Prayer was just throwing up my hands and saying, God created the universe. I am struggling. Help me. Help me. I don't have the answers. I'm doing the best I can. Help me. And give me some light here so I know, And it was humbling. It was a growth period. And it took me off this pedestal of being this public figure rabbi with the answers. I'll tell you a funny story, Phil, that in Efrat, where we used to live in Israel, everyone hitchhikes. You stand at the bus stop and people give you rides to Jerusalem. So I stopped one time and I picked up a rabbi. And I said to him, I'm going to rant for a second, if that's okay with you. I said to him, do you know why I don't like rabbis? He said, why? Why don't you like rabbis? I said, because whatever the issue is, they always have the answers. They always have the answers to everything. That's why I don't like rabbis. And this rabbi turned to me and he said, I'll tell you exactly why that is. He had fallen into that routine of having all the answers. There it was. And so this was humbling for me. And I created Ayekah, and I try to help people now become more vulnerable in their Jewish lives and their spiritual lives. And take whatever steps they need to grow. And we have a community. It's an online community, and we meet twice a week. And it's a very powerful experience. And that brings me to my third Rebbe. And that would be Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Kook, who was the first chief rabbi of Free State Israel, passed away in 1935. And for me, my Judaism didn't really begin to come together until I encountered his writings of all rabbis. There's so many rabbis. Why his in particular? Because Rav Kook was a mystic, a practical mystic who lived both in the heavens and on earth. And he had an attitude of Judaism was meant to be the spiritual unifying force in the world. And everything could be done spiritually. It didn't matter how you eat, how you play, sports, clothes, how you relate to any ideology in any religion. He wrote about everything. And his unifying poetry really helped me discover my inner life. And so this is what I do now. I learn Rav Kook. I teach Rav Kook in our groups. And it's a journey. It's a continuing journey for me. My dear wife, Sandra, asks me, isn't this roller coaster ever going to stop? I mean, I met you and your name wasn't even Aryeh Ben-David. And then, you were at HUC, and then you became Orthodox, and you became rabbi, and then you changed. And now I have to say I'm a little bit, I'm a lot less observant now and a less consumed with Jewish law. And it's a growth period. And I have to say that even though I just hit 70, I feel I'm in an incredible growth period still. And Phil, if I had to say, what do I want to teach? What is my message of teaching for my students, my colleagues, for my friends? I would kind of boil it down to two or three things. So this is the underlying message of all of Ayekah, my teaching, and hopefully I'm modeling this, but I'm a work in progress. And the first thing is, Judaism is an incredible gift. There's so much wisdom in Judaism. And there's so much wisdom in the Torah and the Talmud and the Kabbalah. But the real gift is having a soul. That's the real source of truth. And so my first message would be, listen to your inner voice. Listen, God is talking to you through yourself. Listen. It's hard to listen. It's scary sometimes. I decided to come back to Israel just because it felt like the right thing to do. And when I told my father that, of blessed memory, he thought I was a lunatic. That's responsible because you feel it's the right thing to do? That's responsible? That's how you're going to make money and have a career, and that's how you're going to support you? And when I told my father-in-law, of blessed memory, that I wanted to marry his daughter, he said, why? Why my daughter? I said, because I just feel like it's an inner voice that's bringing us together. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And those are two of the best decisions I ever made. And when I left Pardes, a place where I had, a tenured position, a good salary and all that, and I had 6 kids and a mortgage, and I was scared to death to leave. But my inner voice said, Aryeh, it's time to leave. And that's God talking to us through inner voice. So that would be my message to people. Trust your soul. Don't run away from yourself. Don't be a stranger to your own self. Listen to your inner voice. It takes a lot of courage, and it needs a good friend to do it. I couldn't have made any of these decisions without Sandra, who loved and supported me. It's too hard it's too scary to do on your own. So that's the first thing, listen to your inner voice and find a soulmate to help you. The next message would be, find what it is in Judaism that really helps you grow. Find it. For me, it was Rav Kook and Jewish mystical works. For some people, it's Midrash, it's Torah, it's history. But find what it is that enables you to grow. Because for me, it's all about the journey. The first Jew, Abraham, was told to journey. Lech lecha, go on a journey. Mm. And the first thing we did as the Jewish people was journey, leaving Egypt. And it's all about the journey. And this find kindred spirits that'll support you and help you grow in your journey. So that's what I say, is really what I hope that my students get. And of course, I have to model it, which means shaking things up and not getting stuck. And here I am. And I'll say one last word, I sometimes think that if I had stayed in the United States, maybe I would have been a successful rabbi. Maybe I would have had a congregation, and maybe I would have even made a name for myself in the Jewish world. But I come to Israel, and everybody's a rabbi here, and everybody knows so much, and everybody, and I got this funny accent, and I was a late starter learning Hebrew at 23, and I can't say that I made a name for myself in Israel at all, despite some good work I believe we've done. And that's also been a humbling experience, but a very meaningful experience for me to throw my lot in with the Jewish people. And I think, we say, Mitzion tetzei Torah, from Jerusalem, the Torah will go out. And I hope that somehow that's been part of my message of always, wherever you are in your spiritual growth and your spiritual journey, connected to the Jewish people. For Judaism, for us Jews, spiritual growth is not an individual path. It's listening to my unique, personal, individual path and asking the question, why did God put me in this world in my unique way with all my unique gifts? But I often say I'm just one point in this pointillist painting. One point, a crucial point, an important point, an irreplaceable point, but one point in the pointillist painting. And there are a lot of other points, and working in love and harmony with these other points. So, Phil, that's kind of, what my journey, my rabbinic journey has been. What does it bring up for you?
Okay, so here we are. I asked you one question, and I got a really thorough answer. And while there are other questions I want to ask you, I think I'm not going to do that. I think listening to you give your autobiography, your spiritual, intellectual autobiography this way is really sufficient. And I'm not going to ask any more questions because I've been really absorbed in what you had to say. And I think I don't know if you've ever given that kind of speech before. Maybe I've been giving you the opportunity to kind of push this all together. Maybe not. Maybe this is the kind of thing you talk about all the time. But I really enjoyed it. And
I just, if people want to learn any more, I've had the privilege of authoring a few books. And I can't say any of them were bestsellers, but they were very different kind of books. One is our Haggadah. We wrote a Passover Haggadah, which is called Hearing Your Own Voice. Because so many times in Passover, we quote other people and smart Jews, and we quote other people's voice, but it's really about hearing your own voice, and it's trigger questions and thoughts to hear your own voice. So I want to bring that to people's attention. It's been very helpful for families, for family seders. And the other is the last book that I just wrote, which is called The Secret of Love. It took me a long time to realize that Judaism is all about love, because none of my rabbis ever said that. They never said that. For me, growing up, and even in rabbinical school, Judaism was about learning, praying, doing mitzvot, being a mensch, being a good person. Nobody ever talked about love. And for my Rebbe, Rav Kook, for him, love is the holy of holies of a person's soul. Because when I love someone, we become closer, and that's a form of unity. And we say God is one, so we have to be forces of one, and we live in God's image and become forces of one when we love people. And it's not just love like I love my wife and kids, but according to Rav Kook, it's really loving and being a force of one with every human being, especially and most importantly with the people that I have a hard time with, people who vote differently and think differently. Even those, I have to work to love them. And I think in our divided and sometimes caustic world, this is an important Jewish message to remind ourselves to live in the image of God is not just being right, but it's really creating unity every day. And this is our challenge in our beautiful and broken world. So I just want to mention that, The Secret of Love, and hopefully bring it into our hearts.
And how can we acquire these books?
Amazon, always Amazon. I don't make a penny, so it's not a personal pitch here. It's just Amazon. Okay. There you go.
Well, even if you made a penny, that's all right. That's all right. So say the names of the books again.
Two of the books is the Haggadah called Hearing Your Own Voice. And the last book is Secret of Love. And there are also a few other books, the God File and the Ayekah Shabbat, which is trigger questions on each portion of the week on how to bring Shabbat into our lives. Aryeh Ben-David, those books should come up. Phil, thank you so much.
But one other thing, since you're closing with the crass commercial announcements, you run this organization. So how do we find out more about it?
The best way to find out about it would be to drop me an email. Everything is online. Classes are twice a week online. We do series. We did Becoming a More Loving Person, Prayer, Spiritual, Controlling My Anger, series of 4 to 6 sessions. Now we're doing in the middle of one on Shabbat, Make My Shabbat More Spiritual. So if you just drop me a line, ARYEHBD, like Aryeh Ben-David, ARYEHBD @gmail.com. Happy to put you on the mailing list. We have a one community from Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, men, women, all ages, and it's a very open, supportive, loving, welcoming community.
Great. Thank you very much. This has been becoming reacquainted with you, and the privilege of having you summarize this wonderful evolution of your life. Your spiritual Jewish life has been wonderful. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I invite you to stay tuned for future episodes as with the help of my guests, I continue to unpack the diverse lives that rabbis lead. Special thanks to Steve Lubetkin of Lubetkin Communications for engineering this episode. You can reach me, Rabbi Phil Cullen, at rabbipodcast@gmail.com. Easy enough to remember. Rabbipodcast, one word, @gmail.com. See you next time, and thanks a lot.